Imagine a man standing at the edge of a storm, his hands trembling, his mind racing through thousands of possibilities. He has done everything right. He has planned, calculated, and maneuvered each step of his life like a strategist moving pieces across a chessboard. Yet, nothing seems to move as he intends. Every outcome slips beyond his reach, mocking his efforts. He is haunted by a single, invisible enemy: worry. Worry is not an emotion. It is a quiet tyranny, a dictatorship of the mind that demands obedience while promising safety. It feeds on uncertainty, whispering that if you think harder, predict faster, and plan more ruthlessly, you'll outsmart chaos itself. And yet, the more you obey this tyrant, the smaller your world becomes. Control, our favorite illusion, becomes a golden cage. We tighten our grip on life, believing that security lies in domination over outcomes. We organize, we anticipate, we micromanage. We convince ourselves that the future will finally bend to our will if we just try harder. But the truth is almost cruel in its irony. The more we struggle to control life, the more life resists. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this paradox centuries ago. While remembered mostly for his cunning political strategies, his insights into human nature ran much deeper than manipulation. He wrote, "Fortune is a woman, and it is necessary, if you wish to master her, to conquer her by force." Many misread this as pure aggression, but Machiavelli was revealing something more profound. Life yields only to those who dare to engage it, not those who tremble before it. Worry, at its core, is the trembling before life. It's the refusal to dance with fortune because we fear her unpredictability. We sit at the edge of action, waiting for certainty to arrive, a certainty that never comes. But here's the unsettling truth. Certainty is not a gift of the wise. It is the prison of the anxious. Those who thrive in the world, who bend destiny in their favor, are not necessarily smarter or luckier. They have simply stopped begging for guarantees. They have learned to act amidst doubt, to trust movement over thought, to understand that power does not come from prediction but from participation. Think of water. It doesn't resist the shape of the riverbed. It flows through it. It moves with an effortless authority that is both flexible and unstoppable. Worry, on the other hand, is a rock in that current, rigid, unmoving, slowly eroded by the very flow it fears. We worry because we imagine that things will fall apart without our constant supervision. Yet history, nature, and our own lives prove otherwise. There is an underlying intelligence beneath chaos, a mysterious order that only reveals itself when we stop interfering. When we release control, life begins to self-correct. Opportunities appear where panic once stood. The improbable becomes possible. This is not blind optimism. It is a profound reorientation of perspective. To stop worrying is not to stop caring. It is to recognize that care becomes destructive when it mutates into obsession. When you let go of control, you do not surrender power. You exchange anxiety for alignment. There comes a moment, sometimes after years of restlessness, when one realizes that worry has never changed anything except one's own peace. The storms you tried to predict passed on their own. The people you feared losing either stayed or left for reasons far beyond your imagination. The job, the failure, the heartbreak, all of it unfolded not according to your plans but according to life's deeper rhythm. And when you finally stop trying to outthink the storm, something remarkable happens. You begin to move with it. You stop asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" and begin whispering, "What if everything starts working out?" That whisper is where liberation begins. But liberation demands a price. The courage to let go of control, to abandon the false security of worry, and to trust that the intelligence of life surpasses your fear. As we move forward, let us uncover how this surrender, this quiet rebellion against worry, becomes the most radical form of power. Worry wears the mask of care. It pretends to be your ally, an inner guardian that protects you from future pain. But beneath that mask lies something far darker. Worry is the subtle violence we inflict upon ourselves in the name of safety. It's a form of self-torture disguised as responsibility. You can feel its touch in the early hours of the morning, when the world is still asleep and your mind starts racing like a panicked animal. You replay conversations, regret decisions, and forecast disasters that haven't yet arrived. Your heart accelerates, your chest tightens. The body prepares for a battle that doesn't exist. What's happening here isn't protection, it's punishment. Worry convinces you that by suffering preemptively, you can avoid suffering later. But this logic is a trap. You end up living the pain of 1,000 imagined futures, while the real one quietly unfolds, untouched by your fears. The human mind is a brilliant storyteller. It can conjure elaborate scenarios of failure, betrayal, or ruin, all while you sit perfectly still. And because emotion follows imagination, you experience those visions as if they were true. Your nervous system cannot tell the difference between reality and thought, so you bleed internally for futures that may never happen. This is the violence of worry. It creates wounds without cause. It robs presence to pay debts that never come due. It replaces living with rehearsing. Yet, paradoxically, we hold on to it. Why? Because worry gives us the illusion of doing something. When you're worried, you feel active. Your mind is busy, scanning, analyzing, solving. It feels like progress. But progress toward what? Toward peace or toward exhaustion? Machiavelli would have called this a failure of discernment. He observed that those who cannot distinguish between fear and prudence are doomed to misjudge both. Men ought either to be well treated or crushed, he wrote, because they can avenge themselves for slight injuries, but not for grievous ones. Replace men with worries, and the metaphor stands: either address your fears directly or destroy them. To coexist with them, half treating them, half fearing them, is to invite endless revolt within your own mind. Worry is rebellion against trust. It is your ego's refusal to admit that not everything can be controlled. It insists that your mental vigilance is the only thing standing between you and collapse. But this vigilance is corrosive. It leaks into relationships, careers, even creativity. You hesitate to love fully because you worry about being hurt. You hesitate to create boldly because you worry about failure. You hesitate to live spontaneously because you worry about consequence. In time, the habit of worry rewires you. It conditions your nervous system to anticipate loss before joy. You start to expect disappointment as a default. Even good moments feel fragile, temporary, like glass about to shatter. You find yourself holding your breath, waiting for the fall. This is why worry is not harmless. It's not just a mental nuisance. It's a distortion of your relationship with life. It makes you smaller. It teaches you to approach existence not as a participant, but as a spectator, crouched in the stands, analyzing every move, never daring to step onto the field. Freedom, however, demands a different stance. It begins with a brutal honesty. Most of what you worry about will never happen. And for the small portion that does happen, worry does not prepare you, it only depletes you. The mind imagines that if it suffers now, it can somehow soften the blow later. But life doesn't work that way. Pain comes clean when it comes once. Worry multiplies it into fragments, spreading it across days, weeks, even years. There is, however, another way, a way that begins not in denial but in attention. The opposite of worry isn't ignorance, it's presence. The act of seeing clearly, of recognizing the storm without becoming the storm. When you stop identifying with your thoughts, worry begins to lose its grip. It becomes background noise rather than command. You realize that you are not the voice whispering catastrophe. You are the one who hears it. You are not the storm, but the sky that holds it. The moment that awareness dawns, something profound happens. Space opens within you. That space is not emptiness, it's freedom. The freedom to respond rather than react, to observe without collapsing into fear, to trust that the unfolding of life has its own intelligence. And that realization leads us to the next truth, the one Machiavelli hinted at, and every philosopher since has wrestled with, that fortune favors the bold not because they are fearless, but because they have learned to act despite fear. Life is not a straight path. It's a labyrinth of turns, accidents, and unpredictable intersections. The more you try to map every twist, the more disoriented you become. Yet, the paradox is this: those who walk with confidence through uncertainty seem to find the exit faster than those who overthink every step. Why? Because they move, they act. They trust that the rhythm of life will reveal itself only through motion, not hesitation. Worry is hesitation. It's the mind pausing at every doorway, demanding a guarantee before entering. But guarantees are for statues, not for the living. The moment you demand certainty, you trade vitality for paralysis. You stop dancing with life and start calculating its steps, as if existence were a formula rather than an unfolding mystery. Machiavelli understood this when he observed the fickle nature of fortune, what he called fortuna. To him, fortune was like a river that, when calm, can be guided by dikes and dams, but when raging, sweeps everything away. He wrote, "Fortune shows her power where valor has not prepared to resist her." In other words, fortune doesn't favor the anxious or the passive. She aligns with those who meet her force with action. This is where worry fails us most deeply. It replaces preparation with rumination. It makes us feel engaged with life while actually keeping us frozen in anticipation. We imagine we're thinking things through, but more often, we're just circling the same thought patterns like birds trapped in a glass dome. We confuse analysis for control, but control, in this form, is an illusion of motion without direction. Action, by contrast, breaks the spell. The moment you act, decisively, sincerely, you puncture the bubble of worry. Reality, even when imperfect, is kinder than imagination. Once you're in motion, you no longer have time to obsess over endless possibilities. Your energy is redirected into engagement, and engagement is inherently stabilizing. There's a strange alchemy at work here. Life seems to assist those who dare to move, as if reality itself conspires with boldness. Opportunities emerge from the mist only when you begin walking toward them. That first step, awkward, uncertain, trembling, creates ripples that draw unseen forces to your aid. It's as though life has been waiting for you to stop overthinking and simply participate. The mind resists this truth. It insists on certainty before commitment. It says, "Once I'm sure, I'll act." But the deeper reality is inverted. Only by acting do you become sure. Confidence is not the prerequisite for motion, it's the reward for it. Imagine standing before a locked door. Worry analyzes every possible outcome of opening it. What if it's the wrong door? What if danger lies beyond it? What if nothing lies beyond it? Meanwhile, action simply turns the handle. The act itself reveals the answer. But to act, you must first release your addiction to perfection. Worry thrives on perfectionism, the fantasy that there's a flawless plan waiting to be discovered, one that eliminates risk entirely. But perfection is a mirage that keeps you wandering in circles. Life, by its nature, is not symmetrical or predictable. It's fluid, chaotic, alive. To insist on controlling its every detail is to demand that fire become ice. This is why courage is not the absence of fear but the mastery of it. The courageous person still feels worry, but instead of worshiping it, they move through it. They know that uncertainty is not the enemy. Stagnation is. And as you begin to act in defiance of worry, a strange transformation occurs. The world starts responding to you differently. People begin to sense your conviction, even if you still feel afraid. Circumstances start to align, not because fate has changed, but because you have. Your energy shifts from defensive to creative. You stop resisting life and begin collaborating with it. It's in that collaboration that fortune begins to soften. The river that once seemed violent begins to carry you forward. The same currents that once threatened to drown you now propel you. You discover that the path doesn't appear until your foot moves forward. As the philosopher Seneca once wrote, "Begin at once to live, and count each separate day as a separate life." That is not just poetic, it's practical. Each day is an invitation to act without the baggage of yesterday's fears. The more you act, the more you learn that life rewards momentum over mastery. And as motion replaces worry, something astonishing happens. You begin to sense that the universe was never against you. It was only waiting for you to stop hesitating. The question now becomes, once you've begun to act, how do you sustain that freedom? How do you keep fortune as your dance partner, not your opponent? The answer lies in surrender, not as defeat, but as a higher form of power. There is a moment, subtle yet seismic, when you realize that effort alone cannot sculpt destiny. You've done everything. Pushed, strategized, worried, calculated, and still life refuses to obey. It's in that breaking point that something ancient and liberating awakens. The power of surrender. Surrender is not resignation. It's not giving up or accepting defeat. It's the profound recognition that life is larger than your plans and wiser than your fears. It's the art of stepping out of your own way. Where worry once demanded control, surrender invites trust. Where the mind once dictated outcomes, the heart now whispers alignment. Think of a sailor caught in a storm. If he fights the wind, his ship will splinter. But if he learns to move with the current, to angle his sails instead of resisting them, the same wind that threatened to destroy him now becomes his ally. That is surrender, the transformation of opposition into movement. In our obsession with control, we have forgotten the language of trust. We try to outthink every possibility, outmaneuver every loss, outplan every risk. But this relentless management of life turns us into anxious puppeteers pulling at invisible strings. The irony? The more we try to command existence, the less responsive it becomes. Life, like a wild animal, approaches only when it senses calm, not tension. Surrender begins with humility, the humility to admit that you cannot force outcomes, only influence them. You cannot dictate timing, only prepare yourself for when timing arrives. You cannot make people love you, understand you, or stay. You can only meet them with authenticity and let the rest unfold. Machiavelli, though often portrayed as a cold realist, understood this balance better than most. Beneath his strategic pragmatism was an acknowledgement of life's uncontrollable nature. He wrote, "It is better to be impetuous than cautious, because fortune is a woman, and if you wish to keep her under, it is necessary to beat and ill-use her." Harsh words for modern ears, but in essence, he was describing a truth hidden in paradox. Fortune respects those who engage her with confidence, not those who shrink before her unpredictability. But engagement does not always mean aggression. It can also mean surrender. Not passive surrender, but the active, conscious release of struggle. You meet life halfway, allowing it to reveal its rhythm instead of forcing your own. In this space, worry loses its function, because you are no longer trying to outmaneuver the inevitable. The psychological relief of surrender is immense. When you stop fighting what you cannot change, your energy returns to what you can. You begin to notice beauty in the small things. The way sunlight falls across your desk, the quiet rhythm of your breath, the pulse of life moving through the ordinary. These are not distractions. They are signals that you are re-entering flow. And flow, the effortless harmony between intention and reality, is only possible through surrender. Flow happens when your inner resistance dissolves. When you no longer demand that life fit your mold but trust that your path is unfolding, even through detours and delays. This kind of surrender does not make you weak. It makes you available. Available to inspiration, to connection, to transformation. You become like an open window instead of a locked door. The winds of change can move through you rather than against you. You begin to see how everything that once felt like loss was actually rearrangement. The job that ended, the relationship that collapsed, the plan that failed. All of it was life's way of redirecting you toward alignment. When you stop clinging, you start seeing. When you stop controlling, you start receiving. It's a hard truth to accept. Not everything is meant to go your way, but that's the beauty of it. Because if everything went exactly as you planned, you would never grow beyond the boundaries of your imagination. You would never be surprised by grace, never humbled by mystery, never transformed by uncertainty. Surrender, then, is not escape. It is engagement at the deepest level. It is saying, I trust that there is intelligence in this chaos, order in this disorder, and meaning in what I cannot yet understand. As you lean into that trust, something extraordinary begins to happen. The world, once hostile and uncertain, starts to soften. The coincidences align. The opportunities reappear. The heaviness dissolves. You feel as though life is no longer something to be managed, but something that moves with you. And that is the quiet miracle Machiavelli hinted at but never named outright. That once you stop worrying, once you release control, the machinery of the universe begins to cooperate. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally became open to it. The next question becomes inevitable. If surrender is the turning point, what comes after? What does life look like when you stop worrying entirely and begin to trust the unseen order beneath it all? That revelation belongs to the final act. Something shifts the moment you stop fighting the current. The noise quiets. The tension that once knotted your body dissolves into stillness. You begin to notice things you had long overlooked. The rhythm of your breath. The faint hum of possibility in the air. The subtle synchronicities guiding your steps. When you stop worrying, life doesn't suddenly become perfect. It becomes clear. That clarity is not sterile. It's alive, pulsating with mystery. You begin to sense that events, people, and opportunities are not random. They are responses. Life starts to feel like a dialogue, not a battlefield. The things you once chased begin to find you. The timing that once frustrated you begins to make sense. It's as if life was waiting for you to get quiet enough to hear it speak. Worry had always been the static between you and that voice. It screamed, "What if this goes wrong?" Until you couldn't hear the gentle whisper beneath it saying, "Watch how this will work out." That whisper, that quiet confidence, is the sound of alignment, your energy syncing with the deeper rhythm of existence. Machiavelli might seem like an unlikely guide for such a revelation, but even he, the pragmatic master of politics, recognized that fate responds not to fear but to engagement. He wrote, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." That line isn't merely about strategy, it's about timing. The wise act before worry paralyzes them. They trust their intuition enough to move, knowing that perfection isn't required, only courage. When you stop worrying, you begin to live by that principle. You start acting before fear grows teeth. You start saying yes to opportunities that once terrified you. You start speaking truth instead of rehearsing silence. You begin to move in harmony with the unseen flow that governs all things. And then, as if by some quiet design, the world begins to cooperate. Doors open, people appear, situations unfold. Not because you suddenly control them, but because you've stopped resisting the natural intelligence that's always been there. You are no longer fighting life, you are allowing it. This state of allowance is the highest form of power. It is power without aggression, influence without force, motion without friction. You no longer demand that life bend to your will, because you understand something far greater. That life has already been trying to bend toward you, if only you would stop blocking it with your fears. The irony is exquisite. Everything you wanted to control begins to align the moment you stop trying to control it. The job appears after you stop obsessing over rejection. The relationship deepens after you stop demanding perfection. The creative spark returns after you stop worrying about success. This isn't magic. It's the natural consequence of releasing resistance. Psychologically, this shift changes your entire vibration. Your nervous system calms. Your thoughts slow. You make decisions not from panic but from presence. You no longer rush outcomes. You nurture them. You stop treating time as an enemy and begin treating it as an ally. You understand that delay isn't denial, it's choreography. Spiritually, you begin to feel held. The fear of uncertainty transforms into curiosity. You start to see every challenge as an initiation rather than a punishment. Life no longer feels like something happening to you, but something unfolding through you. And once you reach this understanding, worry becomes almost absurd, an unnecessary interruption in a perfectly orchestrated process. This doesn't mean pain disappears or problems vanish. It means you stop mistaking them for threats. You begin to understand that even discomfort has direction. Every storm carries a message. Every delay conceals preparation. You start to trust the intelligence that pulses beneath chaos. From this vantage, Machiavelli's teachings take on a new form. His call for cunning and adaptability transforms into a spiritual principle. To master life, you must learn to dance with it. You stop approaching existence as a strategist and start meeting it as a partner. You listen, you move, you adapt, you trust. Worry cannot coexist with trust. One is rooted in fear of loss, the other in faith in renewal. When trust deepens, worry becomes irrelevant. And that is when life, finally, mercifully, starts working out. Not in the way you planned, but in the way it was always meant to. When you look back, you'll see that everything you once feared was a doorway. Every delay was direction. Every failure was fine-tuning. The universe was never against you. It was simply waiting for you to stop gripping the wheel long enough for it to steer. And when you let it, you discover something profound. The world doesn't need your worry. It needs your presence. It needs your willingness to act, to trust, to breathe. You realize that life is not chaos to be managed, but intelligence to be met. So you release the last thread of control. You take a breath. Not the anxious breath of someone waiting for disaster, but the steady inhale of someone who knows they are exactly where they need to be. And from that stillness, you hear it again, the whisper that started it all. Stop worrying. Watch how everything begins to work out.